first got to know Russ back in 1969 when he and his family arrived at the airport in January 59, or 69 rather, excuse me. In 2018, I was there when he soloed his first time. I was there again when he received his, on December 18th, 1971, when he received his private license. So I've kept up with Russ quite a few years, okay? He and his family we became friends. And we visited quite often. His father and mother. I'm sorry about this doggone allergy. I got allergies up to my. I've been to the doctor 3 or 4 times. Keep on giving medication, but it doesn't take care of it. But anyway, so his mother and father used to open up a restaurant. We used to patronize that a lot. The FAA offer 2 really prestigious awards. The Charles Taylor Award is for mechanics, people who qualify. I'm not sure what the qualifications are, but it's the other one is the Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award. And out of the 500,000 pilots, now I haven't checked these figures lately, but back when I received my award, there were 500,000 pilots in the U.S. About 7,000 of them had qualified for the Master Pilot Award. Now, if you put the math to it at 0.1006, less than 1% in there. So anyway, so it's a very, very, very prestigious report. Anyway, having said all that, I'll introduce Russ. He'll give you more information, okay?
You want to get the plaque? Do you want to hand me the plaque?
Okay.
Is it over there?
All right. We're going to demonstrate.
We're gonna get in our costumes here for this.
We'll probably get warm in there. Okay. Back over to the microphone. I received this. I didn't know it was available. I happen to know a guy in Richmond by the name of Mike. I can't pronounce his last name because he's Russian. But anyway, but he said, I think you qualify for that. So he sent me the forms and I filled them out. Sure enough, I did. So anyway, we in July 2012, we all met down at Pungo Airport, which is near Virginia Beach, and I presented the award. So now on this side here, now let me go back and sort of recap what you have to have been flying for 50 years without incident or accident or violation. So that I accomplished that. And I'm very thankful because a lot of people have incidents and stuff like that. And now this award over here on this side, that's a program by the called ambassadors by the state of Virginia Aviation Department. If you accomplish certain missions, they award you the jacket and the award. So anyway, that's how Russ has qualified as well.
Good.
So, all right. Now, the whole purpose of my being here today is to award or present Russ with his Master Pilot Award. Very nice. Very nice. Now, there's a lot of other, I'm gonna give Russ a box, and it contains a lot of other stuff. I mean, some paper documents and stuff like that. So anyway,
Thank you, sir.
very good, very good, very deserving. All right, Russ, it's your floor.
Thank you.
I'm sorry about this. Oh,
You sound great.
very
You sounded great.
good.
Considering the mileage. Thank you, Hubert, Razel, members of the society, friends, family, numerous classmates from Orange County High School in 1973.
You of your former student pilots.
And Charlie Horn. More about him later. The Wright Brothers Award is normally given at an FAA facility or function around the United States. I asked it's called a FSDO office, Flight Standards District office in Seattle, if it would be okay if they would send the plaque and the other items to Hubert, so that Hubert would be the one to hand me the award. More meaningful, much more meaningful for me than a bureaucrat that I had never met before. Hubert, as he mentioned, was there the day that my family took over the operation of the Orange County Airport, January of 1969. He was there 11 days later when I took my first lesson with my father in a Piper Cherokee. He was there, as he mentioned, on December 1970, on my 16th birthday when I soloed. There were a group of friends. Hubert was among that group. He was there when I got my commercial license, and Hubert and I have stayed in touch ever since. I've known every one of his airplanes. I've been talking to Hubert for a long time now, and recently we've been reacquainted, and we have lunch here when I come to Orange. I have known several pilots who have gotten the Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award, but I've only known two who have gotten the award. I've only personally known two who have gotten the award without flying for a living. And both of those fellows are here now. Hubert, of course, receiving the award in 2012, and Bernard Estes recently receiving the award. So I'm delighted both could be here today. Not long ago, wasn't that long ago, we all, instead of being here, we might have gathered on my Airbus A330. We might have gathered maybe for a flight together from, say, China to Seattle. Here's some photos of you before your departure. Pre-departure drink, not a thought of the TSA or the long lines. Looks like you're having a good time. Whoa, Nelly. I think I might have dug into the photo box a little too deep there. Those were the days, huh? Here's what it's like. Here's what it's like on the airplane today. Nice big screens, lots of things to watch. You've got lots of movies and seats designed to foster togetherness. Sometimes I used to tell the passengers that I wouldn't be at all surprised that after a few hours sitting there with 300 of your new friends, that in the cockpit I might hear the quiet strains of Kumbaya drifting forward sometime in the pre-dawn hours. once my flight attendants were a little annoyed when a group of Girl Scouts, 25 of them, actually took me up on the offer. And in the middle of the night, they started singing and woke everybody up. Up front, there's a little more room to stretch out. There's no steamboat round or fine china, but at least you can put that seat out and have a nice rest. This is what $6,000 will buy you on your ride from Asia back to America. Now, I was one of the first captains to start giving the welcome aboard public address announcement from the cabin. Before that, we always did it from the cockpit. But we started to think that making eye-to-eye contact, having people see that I was actually a body rather than some disembodied voice up forward, might tend to unwind the springs of some of our passengers who might have been wound a little tight. It seemed to work pretty well. And so it went kind of like this. I'd step out of the cockpit, make eye contact. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Captain Roberts. It's our pleasure, my crew and I, to take you from China to Seattle today. We're expecting a routine operation. We should arrive right on time in Seattle. We'll leave Shanghai Pudong Airport here in a few minutes and fly through the night. And because we'll cross the international date line and we arrive tomorrow morning, it will still be today. We've shaped a course that will take us a little bit south of the Great Circle route. This routing is to take advantage of a jet stream, a high-speed river of air that will push us along at times up to 150 extra miles an hour, giving us a speed over the ground of, at times, 700 miles an hour. This will result in a short flight time. It's going to be a quick ride across the ocean, just 10 hours, 32 minutes from Shanghai to touchdown in Seattle. There are some bumps forecast just south of Shimia in the Aleutian Islands. That's associated with the jet stream, but shouldn't be too bad, and we're expecting a generally nice ride. Now, a while back, I was watching my lady friend's grandson play with his airport, with his Legos. He had built his airplanes, and everything was all set. And he was briefing his make-believe passengers. He said, "Sit down, put your seatbelt on, and don't freak out." I thought that was to the point, and I thought right then I might start doing that myself. Quite to the point. For quite a while, I have wanted to wear an airline pilot uniform. This is me at age 4. I finally got to wear a full-size uniform. That was 26 years after this picture was taken, and I had the pleasure of wearing the uniform for 34 years. The tie is an interesting accoutrement. I've eaten so many crew meals from the tray on my lap, and I've spilled so much on the tie that I've gotten a call from Bobby Flay, who wanted to use the tie as stock, make a nice, rich stock. Well, that was the dream to be an airline pilot. I harbored that dream since before I can remember. When memory started, that's what I was going to be, as I imagined myself as an airline pilot from age 4. This dream started to come true, started to become a reality at the Orange County Airport in 1969. We're not in Shanghai today. We've gathered together here back home in Orange to remember the pilots, the local pilots, who laid the foundation of my career and in no small part laid the foundation for my life. They helped shape me as a person. Growing up, we have influential people. Our parents are most influential, of course. This is not their story. We have teachers and coaches, maybe some bosses we had when we were in high school that helped to bring us along. I was lucky. I had another group of people. I became a member of the village of pilots who populated the Orange County Airport. They made up Orange County Aviation, a population of remarkable people from all rungs of the economic ladder. There were some with little airplanes, Piper J3 Cubs, they could barely keep them going. And then there were others in that population who had jet-powered aircraft. Some of the names here, this is a representative sampling of names. They contributed, some of them contributed a brick or a little bit of mortar. Some of these names did more than that. They helped to build the structure of my life, helped me build the entire, my entire life. Thank you, Hubert, for the introduction. May I read from the book? Now, some of you were at the presentation of Hubert's plaque out at the Orange County Airport a couple of years ago, so this is redundant for you. Hopefully you won't mind the rerun. At our airport, Hubert Compton is a fixture. While the world changes around him, Hubert stays put. I expect he will always live in Orange County, Virginia. I admire that. There must be something nice, something grounding in being content in one's place. But for me, ever since my family, my parents hauled me off to Alaska when I was 5 years old, staying in one spot for too long makes me itchy. Hubert, as mentioned earlier, was the first to greet us when we took over the operation of the airport back on that wintry January day in '69. Over the next months, he was there giving support and patronage when my folks put in a new restaurant at the airport. Now, Hubert is in the insurance business. According to my father, insurance's purpose is to bleed people. Because of his relative affluence and the insurance agency, in my father's estimation, Hubert is mighty close, even though he likes Hubert as a person, as a man. Hubert is mighty close, in my dad's estimation, to be the man, one of the sharks. Hubert has a nice house and a nice airplane. But is Hubert one of the sharks? You can't have money without being a shark, according to my father. My father has no money because he's not a shark. Having no money has nothing to do with his choices. He's a victim of circumstance. He can't see the possibility that Hubert is in the insurance business because he's a people person and offers an important product to protect people's finances. Can't my dad see that Hubert is interested in others' well-being and curious about his community and eager to lend a helping hand? The insurance business helps him meet people. Now, while I still believe in my father's assertions, I'm a young person, still 14 years old, still have faith in my dad. My skepticism as yet not entering consciousness. I admire Hubert and realize the airport is full of people of value. I'm learning a lot from them. Dairy farmer Silas Nixon teaches me kindness. Navy officer Billy Graves, only 10 years older than me, and close enough to my age that I can easily see myself in his shoes, gives me the opportunity to learn empathy when Billy is off in Vietnam fighting the war. Mick Cook, Bernard Estes, two pilots from our neighboring airport in Gordonsville demonstrate how dedication to a hobby, flying for the joy of flight, can be one of life's lodestones. How can one not admire, trust, and even love such individuals? Bernard Estes, the other Wright brothers recipient that I mentioned. Now, he was based at Gordonsville, and I was pretty tribal when I was 14 years old, and I thought there should be some rivalry between the local airports. But never mind that. Bernard is another stalwart. Over my lifetime, my early life especially, he demonstrated enthusiasm, persistence, craft, and best of all, friendship. I take more pleasure in Hubert and Bernard receiving the Wright Brothers Award than I do in receiving it myself. While I do appreciate it and I do recognize the milestone that it represents, I like that they have the award more. Why? They've maintained their enthusiasm for flying and flight for decades, while flying has not put the jingle of coins in their pocket. They have for decades maintained their enthusiasm, excitement for flying on their own dime. There's also Silas Nixon, the late Silas Nixon. And if anybody deserves to have salt of the earth under their name, it's Silas. I wrote this, I was going to put it in the book, but then it didn't quite fit the storyline. Silas' faded red F-100 Ford pickup truck made the turn. Almost every day he made the turn into the airport parking lot. You couldn't pinpoint the exact time of his arrival, but by his visits, we could tell whether it was morning or evening. His first visits were always before noon, and with rare exceptions, in the evening, an hour or two before milking time. We met Silas Nixon the first day we took over the operation. As I recall, he came in an hour or two after Hubert. Several times a year, Silas rented one of our airplanes to fly over his and his neighbors' farms. "I'll go see what's going on," he said. "Gotta see how things look. Keep an eye on folks." He chuckled, kind of like Santa Claus. "I like to see the changes," he said, "the colors of the oaks and sycamores as the year moves along. Who's plowing what? Watching them turn over that red Virginia soil never gets old." Dairy farmer Silas never got a pilot's license. Instead, he was a permanent student pilot. He had over 120 flying hours, triple the number required for a private pilot's license. As a student, he could fly solo, he could fly by himself, but Silas never went for a license required to take passengers. "I just like getting up there by myself," he said. I suspect what Silas liked most about the airport was the company. Orange County Airport was his country club, and his restaurant was his 19th hole. The airport was an escape from the cows, the farm, and his wife. "We need feed from the co-op," said Silas many times. Said this over a cup of coffee at the restaurant counter. Silas always needed something at the co-op, his dairy cows being a demanding bunch. But he metered his needs to make sure he could always give Virginia, his wife, an excuse for another trip to town, and so another opportunity to stop into the airport along the way. This morning, he finished his coffee and stretched his arms. "Feeling good this morning today. This was my morning to sleep in. Didn't have to get up till 6 o'clock. Silas loved to fly, but he never wanted to take passengers, fly for hire, or even think about doing it for a living. Silas's threshold of flying excitement lay not over the wilds of Siberia or the African desert, but by flying around the patch and over his farm. "Beautiful day today," he said. "Not a ripple in the traffic pattern. It's a great day for flying. You can see forever. I never lost sight of the airport." It was rare when one heard an airline pilot get excited about flying. Is overexposure to flying a good thing? After all, gorgeous movie stars get divorced. Imagine thinking about divorcing Barbara Eden or Elizabeth Taylor. Is it possible to get too close to something extraordinary? Richard Burton said of Liz Taylor, "The most beautiful woman in the world. She has a double chin, an overdeveloped chest, and she's rather short in the leg," he said. Flying might be like that. Too much flying might be too much. Silas held his love, flying, at arm's length. He only dated her. Is that what preserved the mystery and excitement? Pilots like Silas might have been the lucky ones. They were able to maintain their enthusiasm for flight for decades. I never heard Silas complain about flying. Sometimes Bill, the airline pilot who populated our airport, would carp about work. "Sometimes it gets wearisome," said Bill. 80 or more hours a month, year after year. Now, don't get me wrong, I like flying, but sometimes the red eyes and flying around the clock gets to a guy. Silas didn't have to fly around the clock. There were no all-nighters for him, no grappling with the ill effects of living with constant time zone changes. Silas talks about troubles with his cows, but he never beefed about flying. He complained about the price of milk, but he didn't have to worry about airline corporate executives, the overlords, interested only in squeezing every ounce of production from a pilot. Silas never experienced the misery of a union strike, a stolen airline pension, or a painful furlough, a layoff. Silas' flying was pure joy. It was never mixed with the detritus of making a living. But airline pilots somehow seem to need to dive deeper. It wasn't about the money necessarily. Many airline pilots seemed to need to get to the bottom of flying, to probe to its oily core. They complained about maintenance, management, fatigue, troubles at the union, and rotten schedules. But they never seemed to quit the airlines. They married flying, for better or worse. Were they addicted? Well, sometimes a guy can't help himself, can't pull away. Remember, Richard Burton married Elizabeth Taylor twice. Here we have a picture of Silas sitting in airplane with Penny Booz. They had soloed very close together in the Daily Progress, and Orange Review had this picture. They're sitting in either, this airplane either belonged to Don Waugh or Quentin Rudolph. Katie and Karen's dad, they're here with us. We're not sure which, but it's one of those two fellows owned that airplane. So what was it like? What was it like for Bernard, Hubert, me, Silas, to take to the air over Orange County? What was it like? We read again a little bit from the book. This is my first flight, my first lesson with my father, who was the certified flight instructor. And this is a little more intense than most flights because it was my first, but you'll maybe get a sense of what it was like to take to the skies. So we have already pre-flighted. We've started the airplane. We've done the pre-flight engine run checks, and now we're taking off. My dad says, here's 60, meaning 60 miles an hour. Our nose lifts off the ground. Okay, airborne now, he says. The wheels quit rumbling, and there's a fluidness now to our motion. The airplane feels like it's floating on a soft pillow, but it feels to me like it wants to fall off that pillow. An image of the guy that spins plates on the Ed Sullivan Show comes to mind. Now we're going to accelerate to 85 miles an hour as we climb out. Stay on the controls with me. Follow through, yells Dad. Out of my forward window, the white stripe of the Orange County Airport runway shrinks and then disappears below and behind. It's clear up here on this January day. No haze. I see fields unfolding for miles in front of us as we climb. There's town, a little bit higher. There's Montpelier. There's the mountains. So you can see 29 out there. With each second, I see further. The Blue Ridge Mountains stand brown and gray in the wintry distance, but yes, I do see a blue tint too. Up at 2,000 feet above the ground, we're no longer climbing. The airspeed needle jiggles a bit, but I see we're going over 100 miles an hour. On the climb, Dad's been reaching up to the ceiling to reset the trim tab every so often. See, I've lowered the nose. I hadn't noticed. If you don't set the trim properly, the airplane has a tendency to climb as we accelerate. He shouts at me. We didn't have headphones back then. As you increase in speed, you need to trim forward to keep the nose down, to keep it from rising. But don't fly the airplane with the trim, he said. Set the nose where you want it and trim the pressure off the yoke, the steering wheel. I say, huh? I don't understand a word he's saying at this point. My attention wanders to the unfamiliar world around me. I've entered an extra dimension. The airplane is up in the air, but I've entered a vortex. I'm like Dave flying through that phantasmagoria in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. My mind swirls in this amazing universe. Everything flashes in front of me. I take my eyes off the horizon for a second to look at the wintry green hills against a blue sky. Sure, I've seen all this before as a passenger. Now it's different. There's something about holding the controls and seeing the world outside change as I move the yoke. That's what makes this different. Here in the air, with my hands and feet on the controls, even the familiar landscape around my Orange County home is new, exciting, fresh, and unreal. This is an unknown country, another planet, an alternate universe. Dad keeps shouting directions and instructions. There's always something to adjust or maintain. I need to pay attention. Having Dad next to me is a good thing. He's the best pilot in the world, 14-year-old me thinks. He's flown in the Alaska bush, and now he's my teacher. This is what dads are for. After I practice slowing down and speeding up to down to 80 miles an hour, back up to 100, he says, let's go back home. You see the airport down there? No, I yell. He says, right there, he says, just to the right of town. See the town? Follow Route 20 out to the right. If you'd like to read more, there are some books back there, copies of my memoir. You go ahead and take one. I have donated them to the society, so I'd suggest a donation to this society. You'll get a nice discount. Let's say if we do paperbacks for $10 donation, the hardback for 20, that'll be a good discount for you, and also put a couple of dollars in the coffers of the society. James Luther is the treasurer. This is a picture at the airport. Billy Graves there on the right, looking at me like he can't believe what he's seeing. My mother on the left, Ann Roberts, and me holding the ever-present gas pump keys like some kind of rosary. If I wasn't flying, it seems like I had those keys in my hand. You know about the hallowed ground of this area. We have the journey through hallowed ground. All the historic sites from pre-revolutionary times through the Civil War. And when we were out at the airport, Orange, for Hubert's plaque unveiling, I mentioned that the Orange County Airport is hallowed ground for me. As I said, it's so important. It's where I say the Orange County Airport was where I had my roots, where I grew. Now here, I had the opportunity, this is sort of a sidebar, but I had the opportunity when I was coming along at 17 years old to teach aerospace in high school. That story's in the book. One of the nice things about writing a book is you don't have to tell stories so often. I just have a life now full of subtitles, citations. I can just say, yeah, I was a teacher at the Orange County High School, aerospace, 17 years old. It's page 116 in the book. These fellows, they went on the field trip we took up to the Transpo, the big air show up at Dulles in '73. Don't remember who the guy on the left is. Anybody recognize him? That's George Jackson there in the middle, Danny Byram, and Lester Wood climbing the pole. Charlie Horn.
With hair.
And
bell bottoms.
You look better now. Charlie and I worked on getting his private pilot's license in the summer before he went to med school at UVA. And from there, he launched a notable career as a physician in the United States Army, retired several years ago now. Colonel Horn, it's nice to have you here today. Orange County has two airports, the Orange County Airport, my home, and Gordonsville. It's Gordonsville Hangar. This hangar is interesting. This was surplus from Langley Air Force Base down in Hampton. Helen Marie Taylor at Montpelier had purchased an airplane, and she needed a hangar to make sure it wouldn't weather. So somehow she arranged to get this hangar surplus. They took it apart, brought it to Gordonsville. Here they are reassembling it. The hangar was part of NACA, which was the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. And after everybody got scared when the Soviets launched Sputnik, NACA became NASA in 1958, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Now, Hubert and Bernard, here's another pillar, another stalwart of Gordonsville. This is the late Mick Cook. Steady, generous, a good friend. Now, I mentioned when I read that bit about Silas, the airport represented Silas's 19th hole, his country club. That's a common criticism of an airport. The government spends so much money building these facilities, and then people have the opinion it's just a country club for a bunch of the rich pilots. Helen Marie Taylor used to tell me that the airport, Orange County Airport, was worthless. She said, yeah, you can argue about bringing customers into the Orange Airport, but she said it's much better if you would operate out of Charlottesville. That way you'd have an extra 45 minutes both ways, 90 minutes to continue to bend their arm and try to convince them to buy whatever product you were selling. Continue your sales pitch, she said. She'd in every conversation with me about the airport with poor old Bloomsbury. You know Bloomsbury? Pioneer home just north of the airport. She thought the airport was encroaching on the sovereignty of Bloomsbury. So what's a little airport worth? There is quite often a financial benefit. This is our dear friend Stanley Ogans, World War II picture when he was in the Navy with his dear wife Flo. Now Stan was from New York City, and when his dad abandoned the family at age 12, Stan became the breadwinner and started pushing carts in the garment district. Worked for his bootleg uncle a little bit too. They'd pump beer through the fire hydrants into the speakeasies. But Stan became a turnaround artist. As he was coming along, he would buy businesses that were suffering. He could see how he could turn them around, make them profitable, and that's what he did with this facility. Virginia Metal Products, just south on Route 15 in Orange, had gone broke, shut down the operation, everybody laid off. Stan heard about it. He went and found the owner, the Episcopal Church, and started negotiating with the bishop and wound up purchasing Virginia Metal Products, which he renamed Virginia Metal Industries. Stan's operation brought real dollars to Orange County. I think he employed 50 people, maybe 100. I'm not quite sure what that number is, but a lot of people were employed. And aviation, airplanes, became an integral part of his operation. We brought many customers to Orange from points all over the eastern United States. I heard from John Paisley, the salesman, the main salesman there at VMI, that the people we brought into Orange and showed them the facility and entertained them there, bought them lunch, 95% of them closed. They were able to close on 95% of the people that came in for their projects. We had fun, Virginia Metal Industries. Trudy Coleman Smith's dad worked there. What a gentleman. I always enjoyed it when Trudy's dad was on board our airplane. But beyond any measurable financial gain, is there any worth to a little airport? May I tell you a little story? This is then Captain Norman Wells Jr. Norman Wells was an F-105 pilot in Vietnam. One day he was shot down, took a SAM missile, and had to go down. Fortunately, he was rescued in the Tonkin Gulf in his little life raft and went back to work. 6 days later, another SAM, this time over North Vietnam. Wasn't so lucky. He was captured by the North Vietnamese and spent some time with them in the Hanoi Hilton. We began noticing this older gentleman. At the time, I thought he was ancient. He was 63. This fellow used to start coming to the airport, and he'd come and have a cup of coffee. And over several weeks, his story started to unfold. He was Norman Wells Jr.'s father. This was Norman Wells Sr. who was coming to the airport. He started telling us that he came to the airport to talk to the pilots. And after he finished his coffee, invariably, he'd go out to the ramp where the airplanes were tied down. And you'd see him out there, and he'd just walk around between the airplanes. He'd put his hand on a wing. Sometimes you'd see him with his hand on the propeller or a cowling, looking vaguely in the direction southwest, in the direction of Hanoi. He told me and others that this was the closest he could get while his son was in prison. And so it gave him comfort to come, be close to his son's beloved airplanes. Do you remember how you felt during Operation Homecoming back in 1973? Some of you will have to read it in the history books. Great joy. I don't have any photos of the Wells family, of Colonel Wells. He was promoted. I don't have any photos of Colonel Wells or his family, Donna and the kids and Mrs. Wells. But these photos, these two photos that I'm going to show you, have represent the joy that they felt, and by extension, the joy that we felt. Boy, when those C-141s rolled in and those guys came out of the airplane, it was wonderful. What's a little airport worth? I'll never forget Norman Wells Sr. coming to the airport just to be close to the airplanes, close to his son, as close as he could get to be with Norman Wells Jr. in those years he spent in the Hanoi Hilton. This kind of story is what I call is part of our uncommon wealth, things that we share. What's a little airport worth? For me, it was priceless. It was the locus of my origin story. It's where I soaked in all that goodness from Orange County's pilots. And the other thing that happened is serendipity. It's serendipitous. It's almost miraculous, where experience take a person. After I soloed in December 1970, the Washington Star got wind of the story and came down and ran this piece. From that, connections. Interesting way things connect. Because of that piece in the Washington Star, I got a call from NBC's WRC radio in Washington. And they asked me if I'd like to be a guest on the Betty Grobley show. I thought that was a lot of fun. And later, after listening to George Carlin, the comedian's album FM and AM, I decided that, yeah, it'd be fun. And, I could do that too. So I did, spending 15 years off and on at WJMA, WCHV, and what is now 3WV. That represented radio. Was fun. It was gratifying. I met lots of great people. Phil Odebear, one of them. It was a possible, viable career for me. And see these glasses? Those glasses represented a handicap that I had that could very well have kept me from an airliner cockpit. So I had to keep my options open. But all the time in radio, I kept flying, kept teaching flying. But aviation somehow kept a message coming, kept calling me back. This is your true path. So eventually, I wound up on the beak of this good-looking rascal, 300-seat Airbus A330, sitting way up front in the captain's seat, the best seat in the house. Flying airlines was a lot of work, often grueling, sometimes brutal, but man, the places I went. I received a world of experiences from this, all beginning at the Orange County Airport, literally a world of experience. One of the great things about traveling around the world is discovering new foods and having new dining experiences. This is a picture of my crew and I having a nice dinner in Narita, Japan. I think we're having Nabamano, I think that's called. Nice meal. And in Beijing, another time. I wandered down to the basement of the silk market in Beijing, labyrinth of hallways, and stumbled across the employee cafeteria there. And they had to, it's because of the Olympics being in Beijing, they were required to put, in addition to kanji, the Mandarin, they were required to put English on all of the signs, which is good. So how about it? In the mood for a monolith for lunch? How about that last one? How about that? Yeah, that's it. Monolithic mushrooms, nausea meat meal. I think I'll move on. The next sign, maybe you're in the mood for the American cowboy bone. Thanks, but I think I'll have the chicken. Once in a while, though, we did score. This was a great Japanese meal eaten in a restaurant on the island of Saipan. There's the food, and there were the people. Better than the food, people. This is Captain Cliff Walker on his first trip. We're over Iran on the way to the Indian subcontinent. We flew our Northwest Airlines DC-10 down there. And there at the Red Fort, we met Rakesh, the one-armed bicycle rickshaw driver. Because of his handicap, Rakesh had more ropes and pulleys on his bike than they had on the HMS Bounty. But he was fast, and I don't know how he knew we were airline pilots. When we got there, he said, United Airlines? No, Northwest. Ah, Northwest. Okay, we go. So we piled into the back of the rickshaw and off we went down the street. We're heading for the spice market. 2-lane little street, median strip, crowded with people, camels, elephants, rickshaws, tuk-tuks, cars, taxis. Rakesh is pedaling as fast as he could, yelling, north and west, VIP, VIP, get out of the way, north and west, north and west. And then he bumped over the median strip, little curb. Cliff and I almost flew out of the back, laughing so hard, couldn't hardly hang on. Rakesh, I always tried to, every time I went there, I always tried to see if Rakesh was on duty. One day he said, no, Rakesh not work today. I said, oh, that's too bad. I was looking forward to going to the spice market with him. Oh, okay. 2 minutes later, there's Rakesh standing by my side. Yep, the food, the people, and the geography. Here's a labyrinth of glaciers. I count 6 individual glaciers in that photo. That's on the east coast of Greenland. How does one wind up in such a place, commanding airliners over such scenery? Barry Middlemas, used to own the 7-Eleven. I was in there one day, hadn't seen Barry in a long time, another classmate. And Barry asked me what I was up to. And I said, well, I'm flying with the airlines now. He said, oh, I'm flying boxes? I said, no, with people. He paused, looked at me and said, how did you get that job? Well, I thought about that. I had thought about that myself. Here I was growing up a skinny kid in Orange County, glasses, too shy to ask anyone for a date. How did I get such a job? Well, I thought about that over the years, and I come to the conclusion it's years of preparation, dedication, persistence, and then opportunity. Some people call that combination luck. After having the dream for so long and doing all the work, sometimes showing up to life has great rewards. This little bump right here, 12,500 feet high. The children of Japan used to be taught that Fujisan, Mount Fuji, was the tallest mountain in the world, 12,500 feet. But behind it, notice that cloud, that thunderstorm? Stretching up, dwarfing Fujiyama. That thunderstorm was over 50,000 feet. We're not going to be flying through that today. The things over the decades that airplanes have shown me, it's a gift to try to figure out how to live an interesting life and make stories, collect and save, tell stories, especially when we share those stories with young people, like you guys did. Sometimes just by living our life and being an example, we can go to some fantastic places. I had the opportunity to do that. You know, I don't know if that life would have been possible if it hadn't been for the fellows I've been talking about, the early role models, Hubert, Bernard, the others. The excellent pilots of the Orange County and Gordonsville Municipal Airport who taught me so much, not only about flying. Some of those people just had a few flights. Silas, for example, only 150 flight hours, very little flight time. But what he taught me about life was just beyond worth. Some of these guys, Bill Payne there, had thousands and thousands of hours. So I learned a lot about flying from him. They were my mentors, exemplars, and role models. They set examples, most good, sometimes not. It's good to learn discretion too, learn what's going to work for you. I'm happy to have shared this little story about how much these men meant to me. And it was all men back then. It was more than 50 years ago. There were very few women in aviation, 1969. That's what people do, you know. We preserve and we tell stories. We have an opposable thumb. We're makers of tools, and we tell stories. These are the things that separate us from the other creatures on Earth. You sure do good work here, collecting the stories. You call it history, but it's stories. Collecting the history of Orange County. Phil Odebear. Where's Phil? There he is. Yeah. Phil Odebear, my colleague from WJMA Radio, has, I tell you what, sometime he's got stories. Ask him about the carpet of frogs in South America. A personal story, but he's also spent a life collecting the stories of others, our neighbors and friends and people who came before. If it hadn't been for Phil Odebear, I would not have known a thing about the Grande Dame of Southern cooking. Yeah. Check that out. Edna Lewis. You know, there are a lot of kids like me, curious kids, kids with a dream. This young fellow's already looking up, already pointing to the sky. So is she, dreaming about airplanes. Both of them steeped in the idea about taking flight. A lucky day. This little guy has a new P-51D Mustang. Pretty happy. Hear this fella. Somebody shared the stories and lived lives that sparked not only this guy, but the other children's imaginations. Then they gave their imaginations license to take off. Even after this young fellow grew up, even he was in his 80s, he never stopped loving airplanes, and he never stopped looking up every time he heard an airplane. I do that. Do you do that, Bernard? Hubert? Every time an airplane passes, we look up. Oh, yeah, there's a Cessna 172. Yep, it's got that old Continental 6-cylinder engine. Or there's a 747 flying overhead. You can tell it's a 747 because of the contrail. He's heading west, probably going to Asia. Those kids were John Glenn, Amelia Earhart, Neil Armstrong, Captain Sully Sullenberger. We sure are good that, we sure are lucky that somebody shared stories with them. Make new stories when you can. Live your passion. You might wind up being a youngster's role model, even if you're never aware of it. Remember the value of stories and save those stories like you do here at the Orange County Historical Society. Share your stories. You never know who's watching. I appreciate your kind attention. Thank you for coming today. Now, I've been asked if anyone has any questions, comments, critiques. Anybody have any questions? Yes?
Yeah, Russ, early on in the presentation, there was a picture of you, I think, as a real little kid in a uniform. Was that an Air Scout or an Air Explorer?
No, I bugged my parents so much when I was a boy to get me an airline pilot uniform. The story's in the book, page 3. I wanted to be a pilot. And I remember Christmas Day when I got that uniform, it came with one of the overseas caps. The airline pilots don't wear overseas caps. I bugged them again. They had to give me the peak cap. And I was happy the day that I got it.
Well, we'll go back to the Solace Nixon sitting in the air coupe with Holly.
Okay.
That air coupe belonged to me.
Oh.
And I traded it in 1969 to Don Moore for a 69 CJ. And Don was going to learn to fly it, but he never did. And Solace Nixon and somebody else, it was two guys.
Was it Quentin?
Yeah, two people used to use it and fly quite a bit before it finally got sold.
So Quentin, Katie, and Karen, your dad owned the airplane.
Yeah.
He just didn't use it.
No, I don't know about that.
No, I think he did.
But it was a great little machine, jumping from zero time, and I'll have to tell you the rest of the story. I bought it from a friend that I worked with. I told Dick Whitmore that was going to teach me to fly. I said, because he didn't have airplanes to rent. So he said, if you want to learn to fly, you have to buy one. Where do you find an airplane?
Pretty good sales technique.
Yeah, right. Trailer plane, good trailer plane. So I went to work and I was telling this friend there that the guy was from New Jersey. And I said, I'm going to learn to fly. And he said, well, that's strange. I've got an airplane for sale. So you got to be kidding. What is it? It's an Air Coupe 415C. And I said, what is that? And he says, an airplane with wings. It's got an engine. So I said, well, where is it? Well, it's in New Jersey. Skycrafters have just put metal wings on it because it came from the factory with fabric wings, you know. And so it's been metallized to make it a nice inside of the plane. So anyway, it shows up a couple of days later at the Gordonsville Airport. And Dick goes outside to see what the gentleman wants. And I walked behind him and I said, that's a pretty nice looking airplane. And he said, that's an air coupe. And I said, what's wrong with that air coupe? And he said, you drive it like a car. It doesn't have rudder pedals in it to steer the tail around. Everything is on wheel. And I said, well, Dick, that's the airplane I just bought.
Great airplane.
And he said, it's too bad you didn't buy a real airplane. Catherine's dad was part of the criminal act that took place there to teach the girls that we wanted to fly. But anyway, so that's where that air coupe come from. 4.5 hours later, Dick said, you can fly as good as I can, so he got it in the solo. And then he said, one of these days you can buy a real nice airplane, which I did.
He didn't say
Well,
real
this
nice. He
guy
said, one
right
of these
here.
days you're going to buy a real airplane.
So I bought a 172 from Hewitt Comfort. Man, in history
Is that 2807? Anyway, pilots get together and start talking. Now Charlie's going to talk to Horn.
So when my dad retired from the Army and moved to the farm in Madison, where my wife and I live now, he had been a private pilot. And so we bought a Cherokee 140 that he kept at the airport, and he got to know Russ's dad. In fact, Russ's dad leased it for giving lessons, and that's when I met Russ. And so I said, well, gee, I'd like to fly. My dad has, and this looks good. Well, his dad was my first instructor. And I went up with his dad, and I think my dad was in the back seat, and I had a horrible landing at Orange Airport. And Russ's dad said, well, Charles, you make one mistake, you'll probably recover. You move 2 mistakes, you're going to crash. You make 3 mistakes, you're going to die. So I said, is there another instructor around here? And, Russ became my instructor and really one of my best friends over the years. And when he was a DJ and I was working on our farm in the heat as a college student home for the summer, he knew I was out there. He started playing Bright Crisp. He said, this is for Charles. He has a great sense of humor.
Well, thank you so much for coming today. It's been a real pleasure and wonderful to see so many old friends and family members. Thank you.